Okay, so just to give a little bit of big picture again, I'm going to open up the syllabus here for a second. Okay, so if we go back to the syllabus here, we started out with a couple of weeks of big picture stuff. So we talked about, entrepreneurship in general. We talked about the three critical foci, and you guys are sort of 1/3 of the way through those critical foci right now. Everybody, all of the groups in here have basically been developing a website, which is the first step of the three. The second two steps are talking with customers sooner rather than later and talking with expert advice contacts. So starting this week, I have contacts for all of the groups to talk to. So you'll be starting to talk to both customer contacts and expert advice contacts. And that's, if all we achieve with your projects by the end of the semester is those three things, something good will happen for all three of your projects. To actually write a business plan, there's a number of other steps that we're going to get to if we can. Originally I had all 9 of those draft deliverables. It's taking longer than I expected to really write good copy in advertising terms for each of your websites. So it's taking longer to get the materials together than I expected. So we're still dragging behind on talking to customers, talking to expert advice contacts. That's okay. I would rather have the websites look good, have a good copy available basically, than to go off half-assed. So don't worry about what we haven't gotten done for the projects. However, in the big picture of this class, I'm teaching you guys all of the different elements of how to write a business plan. So once you've done those 3 major things, develop a website, start showing it to sample customers and getting their feedback, start showing it to expert advice contacts and getting their feedback. There's a number of other things that you write up. You write up a customer profile. We talked about that in class. You write up a marketing plan, which we talked about in class. You write up competitor profiles. Some of you are working on competitor profiles right now. You write up a market environment analysis, so industry research. Some of you are working on that right now. Each of those is sort of a separate chapter in the business plan. Then we had a bunch of 2 weeks when we just did hands-on stuff, and then we talked about financials last week. So eventually, after you have the feedback from the customers, feedback from expert advisors, you're going to have somewhat of an idea of what your revenues could be expected to be, what your costs are going to be expected to be. Based on that, you're going to develop financial projections. So, your projects are going at one pace. The business plan is a different pace that we're not going to get to the entire thing in the course of the semester. So, business plan, there's the website and a prototype. So everybody basically has that at this point. There's outreach to customers and outreach to expert advice contacts. That is then going to be put into customer profile reports. So the next thing you guys are going to be doing when you talk to the sample customers is filling out these customer vignettes and putting those together as element number 2 or element number 3, depending on how you look at it, of the business plan. Then we're probably going to skip over. The marketing plan. Come back to that later because I don't think any of most of the ventures in here are not ready to do mass marketing yet. So we're better off doing more of the planning stuff and coming back to the marketing at the tail end. Then I've already got people working on competitor profiles and industry research. The next step after that is to put together your financials. The next step after that is what I'm going to talk about today, which is your implementation plan. How are things actually going to get done? Who's going to do what? What kind of legal issues do you need to think about? What kind of bureaucratic issues do you need to think about? What kind of human resources, hiring practices, things like that do you need to think about to actually make this venture real? So that's what we're talking about today. Then we'll have one more lecture next week that talks about the executive summary and the sales plan. So basically, once we have all those other elements together up through the implementation plan, you need to summarize all that in basically a 30-second elevator pitch. And in a one-page summary that's slightly longer than a 30-second elevator pitch. And then in cascading form, it's going to go from 30-second, one-paragraph elevator pitch to one-page description to one-page description for each section of the business plan to all the actual sections of the business plan. And it's going to fan out in a tree like that. And that's what it actually looks like when everything's done. And that overall structure, putting together the tree, is what we're going to talk about next week. And then we're going to have a number of guest speakers. We're going to be working on the projects more. And my goal for each of the projects is that each one has a really good-looking website. Each one has talked to multiple potential customers and filled out customer profiles for all of them, and has talked to multiple expert advice contacts and gotten advice from them. Everything else, the marketing plan, the competitor research, the industry research, financials, and the implementation plan, as well as the executive summary. If we get that far, great. If we don't, the most important thing is that you have the website working, that you've talked to sample customers, and you've talked to expert advisors. So that's kind of where we're at in the semester and what the goals are going forward. Any questions about that, big picture-wise, as we go forward? Yes, Crystal.
So each member of the group has to do their own customer vignette and their own expert contact.
No.
Things.
No. That would be great, but so you guys already have one expert advice contact. Her name's Jessica Sutherland. So you're a little bit ahead of the game on that one. I have others that I eventually want to put you in contact with. Huh? Well, okay, yeah, you.
But she's saying
You're precocious.
Randy Martin from Covenant Coffee. We've got Juan Avila from Garden Pathways, and Jessica Sutherland.
There you go. So ideally, if each of you found one, then you'd have 7 different expert advice contacts, 7 different sample customers. Great. If you only find 2 or 3 and you split up who among the team talks to them, that's okay too. Does that make sense, Crystal? The more the better, but it's not a requirement that every person in the team speaks with one. Other questions? Okay, let me dive in on the implementation plan lecture. Okay. So there's a number of different sections to the implementation plan. The first part is the management team. And the first thing that you want to put together for that is the key personnel section. So you're going to want to have little one-paragraph. I mean, you've started doing this, and a lot of you, with your About Us section of the website. The key personnel section of the implementation plan is like a larger version of the About Us section of the website. So you're going to have a little one paragraph bio on each of the key members of the team. And then you're going to have a resume as well for each of the key members of the team. So important in any new venture is not just that you have the people who are actually in the team in this class, but you've also got, for most of them, Shout's an exception, but for most of the, Shout and Baywatch are a bit of an exception, but for most of the ventures in here, we also have the technological team, either the engineering students or the software students. In general, that's always been a missing piece in my entrepreneurship classes before. So everybody in here has varying levels of technological skill, but you're not getting a bachelor's in computer science. You're getting a bachelor's in business. And the bachelor's in business administration does not come along with the skill set that you necessarily need for dealing with hardware and software problems of your company, designing engineering products, coding, software code. Most of those, at least one of those elements, sometimes multiple elements, are needed for any new venture. So if you didn't have those people, you guys need to think about, as you go forward, who's going to be the tech geek.
My brother.
Oh, there you go. For Baywatch, who's going to be the tech geek going forward that solves all the technology problems? Probably not going to be you. But you need to think about who's going to do that as you start putting together the implementation plan. Every venture needs a tech geek. Every venture needs some kind of expert in technology. You also need a board of advisors. And this could be very informal. It could be a formal board where you actually have people sign a form saying they're part of the board. But excuse me. The important thing is that you actually have people who have been there and done that as part of your advising team. And you want I say gray hair here. It's not actually literally important that you have people with gray hair in your team, but most of the people in this class are in their 20s or 30s. You want to have people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, who have had a full career's worth of experience, have a full career's worth of contacts that are advising you in your venture. So if you don't have that already, as you go forward into the implementation plan, you need to identify who are those experts, who are those sort of older adults, as it were, that are giving you advice on your venture. The profiles, like I said, should be about one paragraph long and really position each person in the team with their best foot forward. And your resume, unlike resumes for job searches, should have everything but the kitchen sink in it. If you want to have a full 2 pages describing every accomplishment you've ever had in each job, do it. The resumes that you attach to a business plan are like an appendix, and the more you can document all of the qualifications, all the skills, all of the features and benefits you have as an individual member of the team, the better. So you're going to have one short paragraph really putting the best foot forward for each team member, and then you're going to have a very long resume that's included as an appendix to that. Partners, HR development, hiring plans, you really need to think realistically about what each member of the key personnel in your team is going to do. If there's more work to do than you have people on the team, it's not going to get done. There's not going to be a magic work fairy that comes and spreads Tinkerbell dust and makes the work get done. I've had this problem with both companies that I started. I assumed that I could just simply clone myself, Well, if I know how to do it, then I'll get it done. No. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much energy that every individual person in this world has, and eventually you run out of steam. So you really need to think about what is each person going to do? Is it realistic amount of workload for each person in the team? And if you have more work than you have people, you need to think about who's going to do it. So some good resources to find that. Friends, acquaintances, contacts in your own personal network. I say UC here. This is an old version. The Alumni Network for CSUB. LinkedIn, meetup.com is a great way to meet new contacts. And if you can't find who you need after all of those 4 options, cold calls. Pick up the phone. Identify somebody that has the skill set that you need and just approach them and ask if they'd be willing to be part of the team. And then there's another source that I wanted to give you guys some information on here. There's some really nice third-party outsourcing vendors that are available these days. Time, etc., Elance, Tasks Every Day, Fiverr. These are all. There's some other ones as well. These are all websites where you can basically go and find somebody who's willing to do something for $5. And a lot of times we're talking about people in India, people in China, people in other places who have a lower cost of living than the cost of living here. So you can get pretty qualified individuals at relatively low rates to write a customer analysis or write a competitor analysis. The kinds of things that you need to get done, you can actually hire people for as little as $5 an hour to get tasks done on a task-by-task basis. Yes, Derica?
They have the whole, you know how, I forgot what it's called, what you were talking about, how it could be easier to find your business on the web. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I can't remember what you're talking about, actually.
It's like that section we went over with the web, and it's like keywords, how like small keywords, it could be easier to find your business on like the internet.
So search engine optimization? Yes.
They have that for
Cool.
for everyone.
Yeah, so search engine optimization is a very specific skill set that you can outsource pretty easily on these different websites.
Like online and technology stuff, they have them at $25 because it is hard to do it, and it's like when you look on YouTube of how to do it, it's like an hour. You have to watch for an hour and stuff like that, and have certain things already loaded onto your computer that you can go download or whatever. So they have it on there for $5.
Yeah, so search engine optimization, one of the many things that you can contract through these kind of vendors. Managerial execution. So the next section of your implementation plan after the management team section is managerial execution, and there's 8 areas that you want to be able to say something about. It's going to be a little chart that you put into the implementation plan, talking about each of 8 areas. Organization. So, how are you going to recruit the right people, and how are you going to structure the organization chart of who's responsible for what? How are you going to manage resources and make resource investment decisions? What are the policies and procedures of your organization going to be? How are you going to do continuous improvement? What are you going to do for technology systems? How are you going to structure rewards and incentives for the people that work in the company? What kind of company culture do you want to create and instill? And how are you going to exercise leadership in your organization? So each of these areas, when it comes to organization, I think the key issue the key point to get across here is you want to find the right people who can make things happen, and then empower them to make things happen. So the most important thing you can do in organization in your team is A, hire the right people with the right knowledge, the right skill sets, the right talent, and then empower them. Don't tell them how to do their job. Give them the tools they need to succeed already. You need to empower. If you are telling people what to do, if you are micromanaging your team, you might as well just clone yourself. The whole point of hiring other people is that you empower and use their talents, and 1 + 1 = 3 rather than 2. So most important thing is to find the right people and then empower them to make things happen. Conserving, finding, and allocating resources. It's important to, in an entrepreneurial context as opposed to in a larger company context, you have very, very, low amount of resources. You've got precious little money, precious little capital to deal with. So, in general, anything that you can possibly do for free, do it for free. Any place where you can possibly get in-kind support from partners. So, we're not going to pay you any money, but we'll let you use our computers for free. Or we're not going to pay you any money, but we will let you use our graphic design person to do your graphic design for up to 10 hours a month. Every place where you can find a resource for free, use it. And then when it really comes to things that you need to invest your money in, think very carefully about the projects that you need to put money into and the ones that you don't. Especially as a small, growing venture, you're going to have to make very important decisions about what am I going to spend my precious amount of money on, what am I not. So in the implementation plan, you're going to want to say something, first of all, about how you're going to hire the right people and empower them. Then you're going to want to say something about where are your resources coming from, list off the things that you know you can get for free or in kind, and then give a little description of, okay, the first most important thing we are going to invest our resources in is this. The next thing is this. You're going to want to have a little list of resources, basically, that describes what you can get for free and in kind, and then what are your priorities for the actual investments you're going to make. Policies and procedures. It's very important for enforcing the consistency of how you're doing things. So a good example of this, I think, for most of the ventures in here is going to be how you do your contracts. So one of the big problems that I had with my second company, Market Driver Consulting, was that I got people all excited about all the things that I can do for them, and then they expect me to do everything that they can possibly want. And I had a lot of trouble crafting contracts that would say, okay, I will do this, 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 and this. This is how I will deliver it. Once I have given you this file, I am done with what I am required to do for you. Otherwise, people were constantly saying, oh, well, this is nice, but I want more. I want more. I'm not going to pay any more, but I want more. I want more. It's very important that you write up your contracts and write up the deliverables of what you're doing to be very exact about this is what we do, this is what we don't do. So for policies and procedures, there's lots of things as your organization grows that you're going to have to deal with standardizing and having policies for, but the most important thing that you have to deal with starting out is how are you going to structure your contracts with members of your team and with your customers and with your suppliers. Because if you don't make things very specific in the contract, you're open to a lot of problems. So biggest thing you need to put in here is what are the key elements of your contracts with your staff, with your customers, with your partners and suppliers. Continuous improvement. There's two different ways that I think most small businesses can continue. It's critical that you have something in your business plan about how am I going to continue to learn? How am I going to continue to grow as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a manager? It's very easy to get tunnel vision when you're running a small business because you're so busy, you're so focused on the goals that you have in front of you that you don't take any time to figure out how to make a better mousetrap. So two ways that are very effective when you're in a time-critical situation as a small business is, one, just make sure to promise that a half an hour or an hour each week you're going to surf the net. You're going to surf on websites from your industry. You're going to go and look at First Research industry profiles and read a couple pages of the industry report for your segment that you're in the market. Make sure that you block off time to learn. Not, in addition to all of the goals that you have to get done, you need to have in your to-do list, learn new things. And in addition to surfing the net, a great way to do that is to expose yourself to colleagues, companies, industries that are outside of what you do. You know, so for the irrigation project, maybe talk to a banker. It may be the last thing in the world that you think is relevant for the business, but talk to somebody that is in the banking sector and just learn from them what they do on a daily basis. Learn from them how they organize their own business, because sometimes you'll recognize, oh wow, this is completely different than my business, but I could use the way that they organize their HR. I could do that with my employees too. The further you get away from your normal industry, your normal set of people that you talk to, the more likely it is that you're going to learn. So one thing is dedicate time each week to learning and make sure that you don't cut it short. And second, in addition to surfing the web, make it a point to meet people who are radically different than you, and just talk to them. Talk about how they run their business, what their business is about, and it'll bubble up a lot of ideas for you that you wouldn't otherwise come across. Information systems. There's a whole lot of stuff. That's important in your information systems, but three things that are important for any company are a system to keep track of your customer data, a system to keep track of your operations from day to day, and a system to keep track of your financial data. If nothing else, you need to make sure that you know what technology you're going to use to keep track of all the information about your customers. What technology are you going to use to keep track of who's responsible for what, when is this person's paycheck due, how much do you have to pay them, when is their performance review, what is each person's schedule each week. You need technology for that, and you need technology to keep track of your financial statements, your statement of cash flows, your income statement, your balance sheet, and your statement of shareholder equity. So if nothing else, in your implementation plan, you need to describe which systems you're going to use for each of those three things. And I go back again here to how important it is to have a tech geek on your team. One of the nice things about most of the projects in here is there's a natural tech geek connection with the software engineering students and with the engineering students. But if you don't have one, you need to have a tech geek in your venture team. So that's what I had to say mostly about systems. Rewards and incentives. The key thing here, without getting into too much detail, is you need to have both monetary and non-monetary rewards that you give the people that work in your company. So a nice way that I like to put it is, if you don't pay people enough money, you're never going to get the best quality people. If you don't pay premium dollar, you're not going to get the best quality people. However, you're not going to keep people, and you're not going to have people that are motivated if you don't tell them, hey, you're doing a good job. If you don't do the non-financial incentives, praise and recognition, promotion to new responsibilities, if you don't help your employees to self-actualize as human beings, they're not going to be happy in that job. But you're never going to get the best quality talent to begin with if you don't pay well. So the monetary incentives are important to getting the best quality people to start with. The non-monetary incentives are important for keeping them happy and motivated going forward. And you want to describe in your implementation plan, what are you going to pay, and how are you going to reward people in a non-financial manner as well. Then you're going to have a section on your corporate culture. Sometimes this is a bit hard to define, but it's basically how things are done around this company. So it's things about shared attitudes, camaraderie, the team chemistry that you're trying to build. And you know, I've listed 4 different in the larger, longer version of this lecture, I go into a little bit more detail on examples, and that's what these little red comments are in the slides. I've skipped over most of them, but I'm going to pause here for a second and talk about 4 different entrepreneurial ventures that I've been a part of, and how different the culture was in each of them. So, in Avenue 2 and Market Driver, the 2 companies that I started myself, Avenue 2 was it was just me. I had a couple people that I worked with as partners, but it was really a one-man show, and that culture, as it were, was me inside my own head. Market Driver, I had 16 different temps that I hired, one after the other, to try and find the right kind of person to help me with the sales calls we had to make. And that culture was a culture where I am sort of the expert and the cheerleader, and I'm trying to support whoever it is that I hired and make them into a star. And it was a dynamic of sort of coach and player kind of dynamic, as opposed to a me against the world dynamic. And then Cost Recovery Systems. This is my dad's company that he started when I was still in college, and my first real job that I had after undergrad was being the sales director for his company. Excuse me. There were about 6 of us. There were about 6 of us in that company, and it was like us against the world. There were people. There were the 6 of us that worked for Cost Recovery Systems, and there were all other people in the world. And there was a really, really strong feeling of like the fact that we're a part of something special, that we take care of each other, that we're all on the same team. Very different than the cheerleader, the coach player vibe, and the Lone Ranger kind of vibe. And then finally, Doc 11 is the internet music company that I was a part of in Hamburg, Germany. And that was about 30 or 40 people spread across Germany and the UK. And we were all excited that we were going to be a part of something special. We didn't have the kind of team feeling that we had at Cost Recovery Systems, but we all felt like we were a part of something special. Like, because I am part of Doc 11, this is going to be a big success. It's going to be historical. We were all very passionate about being a part of that company. But that's another kind of culture that's different. And you can set up whatever kind of culture you want in your company, but you need to think about what is the culture you're creating with the group of people that are running your venture. And then finally, leadership. There's 3 things in particular that I want to mention about leadership. First of all, the more you step into a management role, the less you do things, and the more you help other people do things. So it was one of the things that was really hard for me as I did my own businesses, and really when I was a manager in other businesses, I like doing things. I am good at doing things. I know how to do them. I want to get them done as fast and as well as possible. And that's not what you have to do as a manager and a leader. As a manager and a leader, you need to empower other people to succeed rather than doing it yourself. So there's 3 things in particular. Feeling the vibe, or managing by walking around, MBWA. I'm constantly trying to do a better job of this with you guys in your projects, you know? Like, this is why we have the project team meetings at least once a week. I want to know, what have you done? What have you accomplished? What are you having problems with? What can I help you to do next? And with 55 of you in this class, it's pretty crazy trying to do that at times. Usually managing any more than 5 to 7 people is cognitively impossible. So ideally, I would have one team leader from each of the projects in here, and that's about all I can manage. But I'm still trying to. I create the projects new each quarter or each semester, and it's a work in progress trying to help you guys to manage better. It's something that I continually am trying to get better at. But the reason that I come around and talk to each of the groups and ask, you know, have you gotten this done? Have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? Is because I want to know, what are you having problems with? What can I do to help you? And that brings things right into the second thing that you do as a leader, which is solve problems for other people. You know, Derica and Abdul Rahman were having a problem for a while with not being able to get things like you change things on the website and they don't get changed. They go back again. So have you heard back from the help function people yet?
Yeah, they want us to resubmit it again.
Okay.
The problem, the way that they want us to submit the problem.
So
Yeah, so like in the beginning it says explain what your issue is, and then they want us to re-explain with the steps that they gave us. They
So-
want us to change our browsers and do everything.
at least they gave you something to try next.
Yes.
Okay. So that may or may not help, but just the fact that you're having a problem with that, and then I come in and if this doesn't work, I'm going to ask you again, like later this week, next week, did what they say work? And if not, then maybe I put you guys on a different web development platform, or I make some phone calls. Like, you can't really call Wix, but I can call other people that I know who could probably fix the problem. And I just keep doing things to help you fix the problem until the problem is fixed. And that's what a manager, that's what a leader does, is ask, what are the problems you're having in each of the teams that are working for you, and you fix the problems. Like, you don't get to do the fun stuff as a manager and as a leader. You have to do the stuff that is the hardest thing to do, the stuff that nobody else wants to do, the stuff that's a pain in the ass. That's what you need to do to be a good leader, is solve problems for your staff, for your team. And then finally, inspire. You know, your job is not to do things. Your job is to make people happy, basically. Your job is to entertain people, to understand what it is, what their goals are in life, and to be a cheerleader for the people in your organization. If you're doing a good job as a leader, then you should be making the people around you feel good about their job, feel good about themselves, feel good about life. If they don't feel good about life, about their jobs, about themselves, you are not doing all you could as a leader to inspire them. And there's certainly a lot of leaders in this world who do not do that well. But if you truly do a good job of understanding who your employees are, what makes them happy, what makes them excited about the future, if you know what that is and you really invest in it and be a good cheerleader, you're going to get great results from your staff. So last thing is you want to talk a little bit, maybe a half a page or a page in your implementation plan about how you are going to do these things as a leader. Legal issues. So we had a guest speaker a while back talk about patents, copyrights, and trademarks. I'm going to skip through this pretty quickly, but just as a recap for you guys about patents, copyrights, and trademarks, what you need to know about them in the context of this class, in the context of writing up a business plan. Patents are for things. Patents are for physical things. An invention, a way of doing things, a process. It's having legal protection for a physical thing or a way of doing things. Trademarks are basically for a brand or for a name or a symbol. It's for the name of your company. It's for the logo that you come up with for your company. Trademarks are about name and image. It's not about a physical thing. It's about your name and about your logo and your image as a company. And then finally, copyrights are for ideas. So ideas, songs, books, software code, it doesn't have a physical form. It's an idea. Software code actually does things, but it doesn't really have a physical form. It's at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros running around in a computer. So the idea that you come up with is protected by a copyright. So without getting into all of the detail that our wonderful guest speaker got into earlier this semester, as you are like starting your business, in the implementation plan, you want to think about what things am I creating that I want to protect the rights for? What is the name and the image of the company, and do I need to protect those rights? And what are the ideas that we're creating as a company, and what ideas do we need to protect? Those are, at a simple level, what you need to think about, and then describe in one page or so in your implementation plan. This is the patent that we think we need to apply for. We are not concerned about trademark right now because the name is not likely to be copied by anyone, and copyrights will be an issue for our training manuals, but other than that, we're not concerned. Or it could be we don't need to worry about patents, but we need to register a copyright for the software that we've written. You're going to have a brief section talking about which of those three types of intellectual property you need to deal with. And then finally, as far as legal issues are concerned, you need to think a little bit about insurance. And there's a couple of different types of insurance, property versus casualty insurance. There's also life and workers' comp and bonding, but in particular for businesses, there's two types of insurance that you need to think about. Property insurance is for everything you own. All of the computers that you bought, all of the inventory that you've created. If it's Shout, all the beds and the bed sheets and bars of soap and everything. You need insurance in case the building burns down. You need insurance for the physical stuff you have. But you also need insurance if one of the kids gets hurt. If one of the kids gets in trouble with the law. You need insurance which covers injuries and liability as well. So you've got two types, and a lot of companies, the liability or the casualty side is going to be for your customers that use the product. So everybody's heard stories about people walking off of cliffs or whatever playing Pokemon Go. Casualty insurance is going to be an issue for the Ghostwatch thing because, you're walking around looking at your phone fighting ghosts. And by the way, they have a super. As soon as we find a droid that we can use, I don't know if Gang has one, or if not, basically, if not, I'll probably go out and buy a damn droid, just so you guys can use it as an example in this class.
They're expensive.
Well, I'll buy an older version one.
They're like $1,200 now. Well, the nice ones.
Well, I'm not buying a nice one. I'm buying a cheap one that we can use just for this class, like 2 generations old. So as soon as we get a droid, I've seen that like they'll have the camera. You can look at wherever you are, and there's a ghost, and you can shoot at it, and the ghost like catches on fire. They have it working. It's really cool. But if you're walking around like that and you're not noticing where you're going, like you trip and fall and hit your head, like you need some kind of casualty insurance to go along with that. So the 2 types of insurance, there's lots of kinds of insurance, but the 2 types of insurance I really want you guys to be cognizant of when you're writing up your implementation plans are what kind of property insurance do we need for all the physical stuff that we have, and what kind of casualty insurance do we need for our customers, for our employees, and or for our suppliers. And about a page or so on that. Corporate form. Eventually, when you finally create the real venture, you need to register a corporation of some kind. So it could either be a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a corporation. Those are the 3 main types of corporate form that you could shoot for. Each of them has pluses and minuses. A sole proprietorship is basically an extension of an individual person. A partnership is basically an agreement among individuals to create a group entity, which is the sum of all those individual people. A corporation is a separate legal entity, which is linked to individual people, but is actually separate from them legally. So corporations tend to protect you from some certain types of liability and casualty, insurance-wise. However, they also are double taxed. So liability of the owners in a sole proprietorship or in a general partnership, basically, you are personally liable for anything bad that happens. In a limited partnership or in a corporation, you as an individual have a certain amount of liability, but let's say if the corporation had somebody that sued them for $1 million, you are only responsible for 10,000 of that. After that, it's the corporation that's responsible for the rest. So you can separate your personal liability from the liability of the corporation and move that liability into a non-human entity. The cost to start these things varies. I'm not going to talk too much about the costs here because actually it's pretty easy to create all of them. And transferability of interest. I'm also going to just browse over this briefly. Basically, for a sole proprietorship, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. If you want to sell it to somebody else, you want to bring somebody else in as a partner, you own it. It's like me owning this stack of papers. Like if I want, I can give one to Haley. If I don't want, then I can keep it all to myself. I can do whatever I want. Partnership, if I have a partnership with like Haley and Grecia, the 3 of us have a partnership together, then I'm not allowed to give my documents to Sam until I ask Haley and Grecia first whether it's okay. So if they say it's okay, then I can do whatever I want, but I have to check with my partners first. Limited partnership, I don't have to ask you guys before I sell my part. So you have your stack of papers, I have my stack of papers, Grecia has her stack of papers. All together, that's the total value of the company. I can do what I want with my papers. And I don't have to ask Grecia and Haley first. If it's a general partnership, I do. In a S corporation, I basically I can't. Oh, sorry. So in corporations, basically, I can mostly do what I want, but there are more bureaucratic rules attached to how you sell stock in a company than there are to a partnership. A partnership is much more flexible in terms of selling or sharing ownership with people than a corporation. However, corporations are pretty flexible too. They just have more bureaucracy involved with them. Capital requirements, I'm not going to talk too much about that. Tax attributes, this is important. If you have a sole proprietorship or an S corp or a partnership, you pay taxes on your revenue. Whatever profit you made, you pay taxes on that as if it were your personal income. Okay, so if you have a sole proprietorship and you make a salary of $50,000 and then you also made $10,000 in profit, then on your IRS tax form you put down $50,000 of revenue, and in the place where it says capital gains you put down $10,000, add it all up, and you pay personal tax rate on that. If you have a corporation, the corporation pays a corporate tax to the government. So whatever the profit for the company is, call it about 20% of that profit. Corporate tax rate is lower than individual tax rate in general. So about 20% of whatever the profit is, that goes to the government. And then whatever profit's left over, you also have to report on your personal income tax and pay personal income tax on that. So if you have a corporation, you actually pay taxes twice. If you have a partnership or a sole proprietorship, you only pay taxes once. However, if you have a corporation, you don't have full liability for everything. You have limited liability for anything that might go wrong. So those are the trade-offs that you're looking at in corporate form. So I've got several slides here on the pluses and minuses. I kind of summarized them for you already. Project plan. It's important in the implementation plan as well to have a basic project plan of what happens next. It needs a timeline. It needs operational and revenue goals. It needs basic expenses attached to it, and it needs a list of who's going to do what. So I've got an example here. You basically just want to make a chart. This is a project from a couple years ago that my students back in Cincinnati did. You want a chart with a deadline, the person who's going to do something, more or less what are the main costs that are associated with doing that, what revenue is associated with doing that, what revenue is going to come in, and then finally, what are the operational goals that you want to accomplish. So in this case, we were talking about building a new type of website, basically. So first thing that needed to happen is that they needed to go out and find a programmer and a graphic designer and a code. They need to find an overall IT manager, a graphic designer, and a code programmer. They need to go out and find those people. So realistically, you're going to spend a couple $100 on meals and expenses, a couple $100 on driving around, meeting people, buying coffee and stuff. So the first thing to do was find those people, and then once they found those people, the goal was to set up teams of various kinds and so on and so forth. So if you have a chart like this, that's the last page of your implementation plan is going to be a chart that looks kind of like that. And so I've got an example of how all this looks when it's done. Basically, you've got a page with the name of each person and a brief one-paragraph description of how cool they are. You've got a list of everybody's resumes where you can double-click and get them if you want. You've got a little chart that looks like this on how are you going to deal with each of those 8 areas that I talked about in terms of execution. You've got a 1 page that talks about what corporate form you're going to choose for the company. You've got 1 page or multiple pages if you need them talking about what legal issues are you going to face in terms of copyrights and trademarks, insurance, so forth. Talk about how you're going to deal with them. And then list the project plan at the end. That is basically what the implementation plan looks like. Brittany, yes. Huh? I did. I hope it's still recording. Let's see. Yes, as long as I remember to click save and not delete, then we're all good. So that's pretty much it for the lecture. It's 5:07. Any other questions? Okay, then I will see you all on Thursday, and we'll work on our projects on Thursday.